My name is Rachel Carter, and I'm 38 years old. I never thought I'd hear that doorbell ring again. I was standing inside my mansion in Atherton, worth over $15 million, the kind of house I had once only dreamed about. I had built my life from nothing, becoming the CEO of a huge tech company that I started on my own. But even with all this success, there were wounds from the past that hadn't healed. It had been 15 long years since my family shut me out. 15 years of silence, and yet there they were, standing at my front gate, their faces caught. On the security camera, I saw a mix of shock, awe, and desperation in their eyes. The same people who had once tossed me aside were now trying to come back. But to understand how we got here, I need to take you back. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Chicago. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American family. My dad, Richard, worked as an engineer at a respected firm. My mom, Margaret, was a third-grade teacher who was well-liked by her students and neighbors. We had a nice 4-bedroom colonial-style house with a white fence and a golden retriever named Max. People thought we had the dream, life. But appearances can lie. I was the youngest of 3 kids. My older brother Daniel was 7 years older than me, the golden child of the family. He was the star athlete, popular and full of charm. Everyone admired him. Then came my sister Hannah, 5 years older than me. She was the beautiful one, with perfect blonde curls and a winning smile. She was talented, took captain of the debate team, a skilled pianist. And then there was me, Rachel, the afterthought. From the earliest days I can remember, I noticed the difference in how my parents treated us. When my siblings brought home good grades, it was a celebration. Special dinners, praise, big smiles. When I brought home straight A's, my mom would just nod and say, "That's what we expect from you." No celebration, no pride. When I struggled with piano lessons, Mum would scold me, saying, "Why can't you be more like your sister? Hannah was playing Mozart at your age. My dad wasn't any better." He attended every single one of Daniel's football games, cheering proudly from the stands. But when I made it to the state science fair in 5th grade, he told me he was too busy with work to come. Later, I found out he skipped his so-called important meeting just to watch one of Daniel's practice games. A practice game, not even a real one. That's how much I mattered to him. The clearest example of where I stood came on my 10th birthday. I had been so excited. Mum had promised I could have a small party with a few friends at our house. I made my own invitations by hand and counted down the days. But that morning, over breakfast, Mum said, "Rachel, there's been a change of plans. Daniel has a championship game today, and we all need to be there to support him. We'll have to reschedule your party." I was stunned. "But Mum, my friends are coming in 2 hours." "We can't cancel now. Don't be selfish," my dad cut in. "This is an important day for your brother. Family comes first. Family comes first." That line would echo in my head for years, especially since it never seemed to apply when it came to me. That day, I had to call each friend and cancel the party, tears running down my face as I explained. Then I was dragged to Daniel's game, sitting in the bleachers for 3 long hours, while my parents cheered for him and Hannah hung out with her friends. Nobody sang me happy birthday. Nobody even mentioned it. That night, instead of cake and presents, I sat alone in my room, eating cold leftover pizza from Daniel's celebration. Hannah was perhaps the cruelest. As a teenager, she made it her mission to torment me. She'd invite friends over and then lock me out of the room. She whispered secrets that stopped as soon as I entered. She borrowed my things without asking, often breaking or losing them. And whenever I complained, she'd roll her eyes and tell our parents, "Rachel's just being dramatic again." They always believed her. Daniel wasn't openly mean like Hannah, but he never stood up for me either. He just ignored me too, wrapped up in his own world of sports and popularity to care. The only person who truly cared about me was my grandmother, Grace, my mum's mother. She lived an hour away and visited about once a month. Whenever she came, I finally felt seen. She would smile at me and say, "Rachel, you have a special spark. One day the world will see what I see in you." She noticed how much I loved to read, so she brought me books, even though my parents thought reading too much was antisocial. She came to my science fairs and sat proudly in the front row, cheering louder than anyone. With Grandma Grace, I never had to fight for love. It was just there. In school, I did well. Teachers praised me for being smart and creative, but at home, my accomplishments were brushed aside. My dad would look at my report card and say, "Book smarts will only get you so far. You need to learn social skills like your sister if you want to succeed." I tried. I joined a debate club like Hannah, and when I made it to regionals, my parents didn't even show up. I tried soccer, hoping Dad might finally cheer for me, but he just shrugged and said, "Girls' sports aren't really competitive. By high school, I stopped expecting support from them. I focused on my studies, knowing education was my ticket out. I worked part-time at the library, saving money for college. I applied for scholarships in secret, determined to build a future on my own terms. When the acceptance letters came from places like Stanford and Yale, my parents looked shocked. Their reaction wasn't joy, though. My dad's first comment was, "Those schools are expensive and far away from home." I could hear the relief in his voice. They wanted me gone. That broke my heart, but it also gave me strength. I decided right then that I'd build a life where I didn't have to beg for love or approval. I didn't know it at the time, but the biggest betrayal was still waiting for me. One that would change how I saw everything about my family. It came when I was 23. I had graduated from Stanford with honors in computer science and had landed a job at a small startup in San Francisco. I thought maybe, just maybe, my family might finally respect me. Then came the phone call that shattered me. Grandma Grace had passed away suddenly from a heart attack. The only person who truly loved me was gone. I flew back home, devastated, to attend her funeral. At the service, I sat alone in the front row, tears streaming down my face. My parents, Daniel and Hannah, sat together, looking like a united, grieving family. Not one of them came to check on me, even though they all knew how close I had been to Grace. After the funeral, we gathered at my parents' house for the reading of the will. I sat in the corner, clutching an old photo album of my grandmother. The lawyer began reading out her wishes. Her house went to my mum, her car to Daniel, her jewelry to Hannah. Then came the part that stunned everyone. To my beloved granddaughter, "Rachel, I leave my ruby ring and the sum of $5,000. You were always special to me, and I know you will make me proud." The room fell silent. My mum scoffed. $5,000 and her old ring. That's it. But I was touched. I hadn't expected anything, and that ruby ring meant the world to me. It was a family heirloom, passed down for generations. It wasn't about money, it was about love. My dad's face turned red. "This is outrageous. Grace always favored Rachel." For some reason, I muttered. Maybe because she was the only one who ever showed me kindness. That's when everything exploded. Years of hidden truths came out. "You want to talk about kindness?" Dad yelled. "We took you in when no one else would. We gave you a home and education. And this is how you repay us." I blinked in confusion. "What are you talking about?" He spat out the words that changed my entire life. "You're not even our daughter. We adopted you when you were 2, after your mother Margaret's college roommate died in a car accident. No father in the picture, no family who wanted you. We took you in out of the goodness of our hearts." The room spun. I looked at Mum, begging her to deny it. She just sighed. "We always planned to tell you when you were older, but the right time never came." 23 years. and they never told me the truth. Everything I had felt growing up, that I didn't belong, that I wasn't truly loved, suddenly made sense. My whole life had been a lie. I sat there frozen, my ears ringing from what I had just heard. Adopted. The word didn't even feel real in my head. I looked at Hannah and Daniel, searching their faces for some sign that maybe this wasn't true. But Hannah just shrugged casually and said, "Most of the family already knew. It wasn't exactly a secret. We just didn't talk about it. Not a secret to them, but a secret to me." My stomach twisted. I felt like I couldn't breathe. So everyone knew but me. My whole life was a lie. The lawyer shifted uncomfortably in his seat, trying to move things along, but the damage was already done. Daniel leaned back in his chair and asked, "Why did Grandma Grace leave the ruby ring to Rachel anyway? It should stay with blood family." Blood family. The words cut through me like glass. The lawyer cleared his throat. Mrs. Grace specifically said Rachel should receive the ring. She told me, in her exact words, "Family is about love, not blood." That sent my dad over the edge. That old woman always spoiled Rachel. Always made her think she was special, when we were just trying to raise her to understand her place in the world. "My place?" I asked, my voice shaking but rising in anger. And what exactly was my place in this family? To be ignored? To be reminded I was never enough? To be treated like I didn't matter? "You should be grateful we even took you in," Hannah snapped. "Do you know how many kids end up in foster care with nothing? You had a roof, food, good schools. You had privileges most kids only dream about." I stared at her, the sister who had spent years making my life miserable. Privileges, like having my birthdays forgotten. Like being left alone while you all cheered for Daniel. Like being treated like I didn't exist. Those kinds of privileges. "This is exactly why we never told you," Mom said, her voice sharp. "You're being emotional instead of rational." I laughed bitterly. Finding out my whole life has been a lie seems like a pretty good reason to be emotional. My dad slammed his hand on the table. "That's enough. I won't have you disrespecting your mother in our home. If you can't show gratitude for what we've done, maybe you should leave." I looked around the room at the people I had called my family for 23 years. Not one of them came to my defense. Not Daniel, not Hannah, not even my mother. Something inside me broke. "Fine," I whispered, my voice low but firm. "I'll go. But before I do, answer me one thing. Was any of it real? Did you ever love me, or was I just a charity case you regretted taking in?" The silence that followed was all the answer I needed. I grabbed my purse, stood up, and walked out of that house. I didn't look back. From that day on, I was officially cut off. I wasn't invited to Thanksgiving, or Christmas, or any family event. On social media, I saw posts of them celebrating together weddings, holidays, baby showers. Hannah would post photos with captions like, "So blessed to have everyone I love in one place." Everyone except me. My dad even sent me cold, formal emails telling me not to contact them anymore, as if I was some stranger harassing them, not someone who had once called them Mom and Dad. The worst was when I saw pictures of my parents proudly standing at Daniel's wedding, and later holding Hannah's first baby. Milestones I should have been a part of completely erased. It was as if I had never existed. The only things I had left were the $5,000 Grandma Grace left me and her ruby ring. That ring became my reminder that I had been loved, at least by one person. I swore to myself that day I would build a life so successful that one day they'd regret ever throwing me away. But when I moved back to San Francisco, reality hit me hard. $5,000 doesn't last long in one of the most expensive cities in the country. I found a small, run-down apartment in a not-so-great neighborhood. I shared it with two other women I met through a housing board at a coffee shop. Nina, a nurse who worked night shifts, and Lily, a literature grad student. The place was tiny. My room barely fit a twin bed and a small desk. We had one bathroom between the three of us, and the kitchen barely worked. But it was mine, and it was freedom. I landed an entry-level job as a technical support worker at a small software company. The pay was awful, just enough to cover rent and food. Most of my days were spent answering calls from frustrated customers, walking them through simple fixes, and writing notes for the developers. It was boring. It didn't use my degree, but it was a foot in the door. At my 3-month review, my boss said, "Rachel, you're overqualified for this role, but I like your work ethic. If you stick with it, opportunities will come." But I didn't want to wait around. I had no time to waste. Every night after work, I sat at my tiny desk, teaching myself more programming languages, diving into cybersecurity courses online, and working on small projects. Sleep became a luxury. I lived on ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches. I walked instead of paying for buses. I even cut my own hair to save money. Every dollar I saved meant more independence from the family that had rejected me. 6 months into this grind, I saw a flyer for a free tech workshop at the library. The speaker was Dr. Maya Lee, a well-known professor from Berkeley. The topic was about new threats in cybersecurity, which I was obsessed with. I sat in the back row, taking notes like crazy. When the presentation ended, I gathered my courage and asked her a question about an encryption method she mentioned. She looked at me, surprised. "That's a sharp observation. Most people wouldn't have noticed that detail. Are you working in the field?" I explained my background and what I was trying to do, though I left out the messy parts about my family. Maya smiled warmly. "You have a good mind for this. Next month, I'm hosting a hackathon at Berkeley. You should come." That hackathon changed my life. I worked with a group of strangers, and together we found a serious security flaw in a financial app. Our solution won 3rd place, but more importantly, people noticed me. Professionals, investors, and Maya herself. She became my unofficial mentor, inviting me to more events, sending me resources, and encouraging me. "Rachel," she told me once, "you think differently than most people. You see gaps others miss. That's your strength." Under her guidance, I started working on a new idea, different way to protect personal data, focusing on behavior patterns instead of passwords. It was risky, but it had potential. The problem was, I had no money to build it. Maya suggested, "You should pitch to investors. This could be groundbreaking." I was terrified, but I tried. I spent weeks preparing a business plan, practicing my pitch, and meeting anyone who would listen. 20-7 investors turned me down. Some said I didn't have enough experience. Others said the idea was too risky. Every rejection felt like echoes of my family, telling me I wasn't good enough. But I refused to quit to pay my bills. I took a second job bartending at a popular tech hangout. It was exhausting, working long, days in tech support and late nights behind the bar. But it kept me afloat. One evening, a customer named Ethan struck up a conversation about cybersecurity. He kept coming back week after week, asking me questions, testing my knowledge. Finally, he admitted, "I've been checking if you're the real deal, or just talk. You're the real deal. Show me your business plan." 2 weeks later, he gave me a $200,000 investment to build my prototype. It wasn't much compared to big startups, but it was enough to quit my tech support job and go all-in. I rented a small office and started working 16-hour days. There were endless problems, bugs in the code, failures in testing, times I thought I had wasted it all. On the worst night, I'd sit at my desk, clutching Grandma Grace's ruby ring, and whisper her words to myself, "You have a special spark." After 8 months of sweat and tears, I had a working prototype, rough but real. Ethan arranged a demo for a group of serious investors. This time, they didn't dismiss me. One of them said, "This approach is genuinely innovative. With refinement, it could change the game." That meeting secured more funding, enough to hire 3 employees and move into a real office. My company SecureNet was born for the first time. I felt like I was building not just a business, but a future that was truly mine. Launching SecureNet was both exciting and terrifying. For months, I had lived on cheap food, little sleep, and pure determination. Now, with my first small team and a little office space, I finally had the chance to turn my idea into something real. Our first product. Security system based on behavioral patterns took off faster than I ever dreamed. Tech blogs wrote about it, calling it a revolutionary step in online safety. Within 6 months, we had 3 major companies sign licensing deals to use our technology. It felt unreal. The girl who once sat alone on her 10th birthday, eating cold pizza in her room, now had her invention featured in tech. The same girl who was told she wasn't good enough now had her work praised by Fortune 500 companies. And yet, success came with a price. I worked nearly around the clock. My team grew from 3 to 15, then 30, then 100 employees. Within 2 years, I interviewed every hire myself, not just to test skills, but to make sure they had integrity and passion. I wasn't just building a company, I was building a family. The kind of family I had never truly had. Dr. Maya Lee, my mentor, came to visit one day. Looking around at our bustling office, she said, "Rachel, you've created something special here. And I don't just mean the technology." She was right. I had built a culture where everyone mattered. Every birthday was celebrated, every achievement noticed. I made sure no one ever felt invisible the way I had for so long. Our second product, a secure communication platform, drew attention from government agencies and international companies worried about cyber attacks. Those contracts pushed SecureNet's valuation past $100 million in just 3 years. My personal life started to change. 2. I moved out of the cramped apartment I shared with Nina and Lily into a luxury condo overlooking the bay. I replaced my thrift store clothes with professional outfits, not out of vanity, but because I had learned how much appearances mattered in business. I upgraded my old car to a sleek Tesla Dot from the outside. It looked like I had it all. But at night, I often sat alone in my silent condo, staring out at the city lights, feeling emptiness creep in. Success, I learned, can be very lonely. On the 5th anniversary of SecureNet, we signed our biggest deal yet, a $200 million contract. With a group of international banks, the office celebration was wild champagne, cheers, bonuses handed out to everyone. But when the party ended, my employees went home to their families, and I went home to an empty condo. I poured myself a glass of wine and scrolled through social media. That's when I saw it, a post from Hannah, annual Carter family reunion, at the lake house. So blessed to have everyone together. There they all were. My parents, my brother, my sister, her kids, extended family, smiling, laughing, a perfect family portrait without me. I closed the app. My chest ached, but then a thought settled in. If I couldn't have the family I was born into, I would create a life so full, so meaningful, that their absence wouldn't matter. The very next day, I started house hunting. After weeks of searching, I found it, a sprawling estate in Atherton, the most exclusive neighborhood in Silicon Valley. The $15 million property had a massive main house, a guest house, a pool, and 3 acres of gardens. My financial advisor raised an eyebrow. "Rachel, are you sure? This is a big investment for one person." "I'm sure," I said. "This isn't just a house. It's a statement." I spent 6 months renovating it. The dining room became my home office. One wing became a library filled with thousands of books, something I had always dreamed of as a child. The crown jewel was the garden. I hired a top landscape designer to build an English-style garden, full of winding paths, hidden benches, and flowers blooming year-round. In a quiet corner, I placed a memorial bench with my grandmother Grace's name engraved on it, surrounded by her favorite flowers. This was my sanctuary, my safe place. As SecureNet grew to over 500 employees with offices in 5 countries, I also began giving back. I joined charities supporting foster kids and orphans. I created a scholarship fund for students from tough backgrounds who wanted to study computer science. I mentored young women in tech, helping them overcome the same obstacles I once faced. Through all this, I slowly built a circle of real friends, people who knew me not for my past, but for who I had become. There was Ethan, my first investor, who became a trusted advisor and sailing buddy on weekends. Maya, my mentor, who often visited, with her husband and kids for dinner. Lily, my old roommate, now a literature professor at Stanford. We still met monthly for coffee and book talks. And then there was my executive team. Carla, my brilliant CTO, James, the careful CFO, and Victor, the coup who kept everything running. Smoothly, they had started as employees, but over the years, they became something more. People I trusted. People I respected. For the first time, I felt like I had a kind of family. But no matter how far I got, the past had a way of creeping back. Sometimes, late at night, I'd flip through an old photo album from childhood, the one I had taken when I left my parents' house. Smiling faces of people who once claimed to love me. Looking at those photos, I often wondered, was there ever a moment they truly cared for me? 10 years after founding SecureNet, we went public. Overnight, I became a billionaire on paper. My face landed on magazine covers with headlines like the cybersecurity queen, how Rachel Carter built an empire from nothing. If my family saw those articles, they never reached out. Their silence was both a relief and a wound. On the 15th anniversary of the day they cast me out, I held a massive charity gala at my Atherton estate. It raised $10 million for foster care programs, a cause close to my heart. As I stood before the crowd of business leaders, celebrities, and politicians, I couldn't help but think of the journey, from a lonely girl with nothing but $5,000 and a ruby ring, to one of the most powerful women in tech. It should have felt like the ultimate victory, and in many ways, it was. But deep down, part of me still wondered why I was never enough for them. The next morning, my security system buzzed. It was a quiet Sunday. I was on the terrace in silk pajamas, sipping coffee, watching hummingbirds in the garden. The chime startled me. Visitors at the gate. I opened the tablet linked to my cameras and froze. Standing outside were faces I hadn't seen in 15 years. My father, Richard, older now, his hair fully grey, shoulders slouched. My mother, Margaret, her face lined with age, still wearing that same pearl necklace she always wore. Behind them was Daniel, heavier now, his once athletic build softened with age. And Hannah, still dressed to perfection, blonde hair streaked, with highlights to hide grey. Beside her stood 2 kids, a boy around 10 and a girl about 8, my niece and nephew, children I had never met. 15 years of silence, 15 years of being erased, and now they were here, at the gates of the life I built without them. At first I wanted to ignore it, let them stand outside until they gave up and left. But curiosity tugged at me. What could possibly bring them here now? With shaking hands, I pressed the intercom button. "Can I help you?" My mother's voice came through, shaky. "Rachel, it's Mom and Dad, and Daniel and Hannah. We were hoping we could talk after 15 years. I should have said no. I should have told them to leave forever. But some part of me, the little girl who once longed for their approval, pressed the button to open the gate. I rushed upstairs, threw on jeans and a simple blouse, ran a brush through my hair. I didn't want to look like I had prepared for them, but I also didn't want to seem caught off guard. By the time the doorbell rang, I had composed myself. I opened the door. There they were, looking up at my grand home with awe and discomfort. "Rachel," my mum said, stepping forward as if to hug me. "You look wonderful." I stepped back, avoiding the hug. "Thanks," I said coolly. "This is unexpected. We've been thinking about reaching out for a while," Dad said softly. "When we saw the article about your gala in the Wall Street Journal, we thought maybe it was time." Of course, they hadn't come because they missed me. They came because they saw my success splashed in national news. "Come in," I said politely, my voice flat. As they walked into my marble foyer, their eyes widened at the sweeping staircase. The chandeliers, the artwork. Daniel even let out a low whistle. "This is something else." I forced a smile. "Thanks. Make yourselves comfortable." I led my family into the living room, where tall windows looked out over the gardens and pool. Everything about the space screamed success: the Italian leather sofas, the modern art on the walls, the polished floors. I could feel their eyes darting around, taking in every detail. "Can I get you something to drink?" I asked. My voice sounded calm, but inside, my stomach was twisting. "Coffee would be lovely," Mum said quickly, perching on the edge of the sofa as if she wasn't sure she was allowed to sit in my house. "Sure," I said, walking into the kitchen. I leaned against the counter, taking a few deep breaths. For 15 years, I had imagined this moment what I'd say if they ever showed up again. I pictured myself strong, untouchable, maybe even cold. But now that it was happening, I felt vulnerable in a way I hadn't felt in years. After steadying myself, I carried a tray back into the room. I set it down carefully, making sure they noticed the fine porcelain cups. A part of me couldn't resist the small display of wealth. Hannah's kids were exploring the room, running their hands over the bookshelves, staring at the big windows. "These are my children," Hannah said, her voice softer than usual. "This is Noah, and this is Chloe." I gave them a small smile. "Hello." They looked at me curiously, unsure how to react. After all, I was a stranger to them, though I was their aunt. "They're beautiful," I added, because it seemed like the polite thing to say. "We've missed you, Rachel," Mum said, her eyes watering as she wrapped her hands around the coffee cup. "We've thought about you all these years." "Really?" I asked, my tone sharp but even. "Because I don't recall a single birthday card or Christmas greeting, or any message at all in 15 years. Dad cleared his throat. "After the way things ended, we didn't know how to reach out. We weren't sure you'd want to hear from us." "You could have tried," I replied firmly. "My email hasn't changed. My company isn't exactly hard to find." Daniel shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "We've been following your career, reading about your success. We're proud of you." "Proud," I repeated slowly, the word bitter on my tongue. "Now you're proud. Not when I graduated with honors, not when I started my company, not when I needed encouragement. But now that I have a mansion and a billion-dollar company, proud." An awkward silence filled the room. Even the kids seemed to sense the tension, moving closer to Hannah, who wrapped an arm around them. Finally, Dad spoke again. "Rachel, we didn't just come to reconnect, though that's part of it. We also, well, we could use your help." There it was, the real reason. "What kind of help?" I asked, though deep down I already knew. Dad shifted in his seat, looking embarrassed. "Financial help. The family business went under last year. The economy hit us hard. At my age, it's been impossible to find new work. I lost my job 6 months ago," Daniel added quickly. "I've been freelancing, but it's unstable, and I'm going through a divorce. It's been tough." Hannah leaned forward, her voice lower. "My husband left me for his secretary. Classic story. I'm in the middle of a messy settlement, and my legal bills are piling up." I looked at each of them, one by one. The same people who had turned their backs on me when I had nothing. Now they were here, asking for everything, Dad. Must have mistaken my silence for consideration, because he continued, "We were thinking you could help us restart the family business. A loan of about $2 million would give us the chance to rebuild, something the whole family could be part of." "The whole family," I repeated slowly. "Yes," Mom said eagerly. "You could be part of it too, of course. Although we know you're busy with your own company, you could just be a silent partner. It would also help secure Noah and Chloe's future." She gestured toward the kids, a calculated move to tug at my heartstrings. "We'd pay you back, Dad," added quickly, "with interest. And maybe you could even consider allocating some shares of SecureNet to the family trust. That way everything stays in the family." The nerve of it made me feel almost sick. After 15 years of silence, after pushing me out and pretending I didn't exist, they had come to my home not just for money, but for a piece of the company I built from nothing. "I see," I said finally, my voice flat. I stood slowly, smoothing the fabric of my jeans, my face calm though. My insides burned. The room went quiet, all of them watching me carefully. "Please, make yourselves comfortable," I said evenly. "The coffee is imported from a small farm in Colombia. I visited it myself last year." I saw Dad's eyes narrow slightly, recalculating the scope of my wealth. Hannah's eyes darted around the room, as if mentally counting the value of every piece of furniture. I excused myself and returned with a leather-bound album and my laptop. I set them both down on the coffee table and sat across from them, legs crossed, posture steady, the same way I sat in boardrooms when I knew I had all the power. "Before we talk about money," I said, my voice cool, "let's catch up on the last 15 years. After all, we're family, right?" Mom nodded quickly, relieved. "Yes, of course. We have so much to catch up on." I opened the album. The first page showed a screenshot of a Facebook post from years ago, a Thanksgiving dinner at my parents' house, just 3 months after they told me never to contact them again. The caption read, "Grateful for family today and always." I looked at them calmly. I noticed everyone was there, even extended relatives. Uncle Robert, Aunt Linda, cousins, everyone, except me. Their smiles faded. I flipped to the next page. Christmas, same year. Nothing better than having the whole family together for the holidays. "That's a nice tree, Mom. Did you use the ornaments I made in elementary school? Or did those get thrown out along with my baby pictures?" Page after page, I showed them screenshots and photos, birthdays, weddings, baby showers, anniversaries. All the moments I was excluded from. All their captions about complete family gatherings. Hannah's voice finally broke through. "Why do you have all this?" I gave her a small, cold smile. "Know your enemy. Dad taught me that. Best lesson he ever gave me." I closed the album and opened my laptop. "Now, let's look at some more recent history." I pulled up an email from 12 years ago. "This is from you, Dad. Rachel, I must insist you stop contacting family members. We've moved on and expect you to respect our privacy." That was in response to the only Christmas card I ever sent after leaving. A simple card wishing you happy holidays. No accusations, no requests. Just a card. That was your reply. Dad stared at his hands, shame flickering across his face. "And here," I continued, pulling up another document. An email Hannah accidentally copied me on just 3 years ago. "Oh, saw another article about my sister, the tech genius." Mom wouldn't shut up about it all day, as if being rich makes up for being such a freak growing up. Hannah's face flushed red. "I didn't mean, oh, I think you did." I cut in sharply. "But it doesn't matter. Your opinion of me hasn't mattered in a long time." I closed the laptop, leaning forward, my eyes locking on each of them. "For 15 years, You lived your lives as if I didn't exist. You celebrated milestones, supported each other, posted about being a family, just without me. That was your choice. And now you come here, to the life I built without you, asking for money, asking for shares in my company, talking about family as if it's something you can pick up and put down whenever it benefits you. Their faces were pale. My mother cried, silently, tears streaking down her cheeks. Dad's face was tight with frustration. Daniel stared at the floor. Hannah sat stiffly, her expression caught between anger and embarrassment. But my eyes shifted to Noah and Chloe. They looked confused and scared. Clutching their mother's hands, I softened my voice slightly. I don't believe in punishing children for the mistakes of their parents. I turned to them. Noah, Chloe, I'm your Aunt Rachel. We've never met before today, and that's not your fault. I'd like to get to know you, if you're open to it. Then I faced the adults again. As for money, I will not be giving you $2 million to restart a failed business. I will not be signing over shares of SecureNet. What I will do is set up education funds for Noah and Chloe so they can attend any college they choose. The money will be managed by my financial team, and it will be used only for education. You will have no access to it. Hannah's lips tightened. We don't need your charity. It's not charity, I said firmly. It's an investment in the only innocent people in this room. I stood, signaling that the meeting was over. That's my offer. Take it or leave it. The room went cold after my words. My father's face turned red, the way it always did when he was about to explode. He pushed himself up from the sofa, his hands clenched into fists. After everything we did for you, he barked, this is how you repay us. I looked him straight in the eye, calm but firm. Remind me, Dad, what exactly did you do for me? Please, tell me. I'd love to hear it. His jaw tightened. We gave you a home when no one else wanted you. We fed you, clothed you, sent you to good schools. Without us, you'd have been nothing. I shook my head slowly. No, you did the bare minimum required of parents, and you made sure I knew every single day that I was an obligation, not someone you loved. The moment I was old enough, you cast me out without a second thought. Don't rewrite history now just because you want something from me. Mum stood, the tears running down her face. Rachel, please. We made mistakes. We're sorry. I let out a bitter laugh. Are you sorry for what you did? Or sorry that I became successful without you? Because those are two very different things. She had no answer. I sighed. I think it's time for you to go. They all looked shocked, as if they couldn't believe I was really dismissing them. But I stayed steady. My assistant will contact you about the education funds for Noah and Chloe. If you want to accept them, fine. If not, that's your choice. Either way, I wish you luck. I walked them to the door, every step a reminder of how much strength it had taken to get here. Just as they were stepping outside, Hannah turned back. For the first time in decades, her voice was soft. For what it's worth, I'm proud of what you've accomplished. I really am. It was too little, too late. But I gave her a small nod. Take care of your children, Hannah. They deserve better than what we had. And then I closed the door. The moment the latch clicked, my chest tightened, and tears finally spilled down my cheeks. But they weren't tears of sadness. They weren't even tears of anger. They were tears of release. For the first time in my life, I felt truly free. I pulled out my phone and dialed the one person who had always been there when I needed her. Maya, it's me. My family just left. I need a friend right now. Say no more, she replied instantly. I'll be there. Half an hour later, I heard tires crunching on the driveway. Maya walked into the garden and found me sitting on Grandma Grace's bench. The ruby ring glimmered on my finger as I twisted it absently, a nervous habit I'd had for years. Rough day? She asked softly, sitting beside me. You could say that, I replied with a shaky smile. I told her everything from the moment I saw them on the camera to the second I closed the door behind them. She listened silently, her face shifting with every emotion I described. When I finished, she shook her head. $2 million and shares of your company after 15 years of ignoring you. The audacity is almost impressive. That startled a laugh out of me. Right? They just walked in as if the past never happened, as if everything they did could be erased with coffee and a few empty words. But you stood your ground, Maya said firmly, reaching over to squeeze my hand. You offered to help the kids without letting the adults manipulate you. That took courage. We sat in silence for a while, watching the sun dip lower in the sky. The day had left me drained, but also strangely at peace. You know what the strangest part is? I said finally. For years, I dreamed about this moment, about them showing up, seeing how successful I'd become, regretting everything. I thought it would feel like victory. But now that it's happened, it feels empty. Their regret doesn't change anything. Maya nodded. That's because you've realized something important. Their approval was never the prize you thought it was. Her words hit me like a truth I had been circling for years. Exactly, I whispered. I spent so much of my life trying to earn love that should have been given freely. Building this company, this fortune. Part of me was still that little girl trying to prove I was worthy. But now I know. Their inability to love me wasn't my failure, was theirs. No amount of success could ever fix what was broken in them. In the days that followed, I went through a storm of emotions, anger, grief, even a strange kind of mourning, not for what happened that day, but for the family I had never truly had. But underneath it all was something new, freedom, the last fragile hope that they might one day change, that we might somehow become a real family that hope had died. And its absence gave me space to breathe in a way I never had before. A week later, I made a decision that would change not only my life, but many others. I started the Grace Foundation, named after my grandmother, dedicated to helping kids in foster care and those who had been mistreated by their adoptive families. We would provide financial help, scholarships, therapy, mentorship, and legal advocacy. I donated $50 million as the starting fund and promised to personally oversee its growth alongside my work at SecureNet. One day, I met up with Lily, my old roommate, who was now teaching literature at Stanford. Over coffee, I shared my idea for the foundation and why it mattered so much to me. She looked at me with wide eyes. Rachel, I never knew. All those years we lived together, I had no idea what you had gone through. I was good at hiding it, I admitted. I didn't want anyone's pity. It's not pity to let people care about you, she said gently. It's human connection. And I think you've been denying yourself that for too long. Her words stuck with me. She was right. I had built walls to protect myself from rejection. But those walls also kept out genuine connection. True to my promise, I set up the education funds for Noah and Chloe. A few weeks later, I received a stiff, formal email from Hannah. Thank you. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was something a small step, not for her, but for the next generation. 3 months after my family's visit, I joined a support group for adults estranged from their families, sitting in a circle with people who had lived through the same pain. I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Understood, one woman said something that stayed with me. Family isn't always blood. Family is who shows up when you need them. I realized then that I had been building a family all along, just not the one I was born into. There was Maya, who believed in me when I was just a scared young woman at a library workshop. Ethan, who gave me a chance when 27 investors said no. My executive team, Carla, James, and Victor, who stood beside me as we grew from nothing to an empire. And the children whose letters and drawings now covered a wall in my office, thanking me for the scholarships and programs the Grace Foundation gave them. 6 months after that painful reunion, I decided to host a different kind of gathering at my estate. Not a gala, not a business event, but something personal. I invited everyone who had become part of my chosen family. Maya and her husband brought their kids. Ethan came with his wife. Lily came. Even Nina, my old roommate, showed up. My executive team was there, laughing and relaxing outside of the office for once. And members of my support group joined, bringing food and stories. The house and gardens filled with laughter, conversation, and warmth. People who truly knew me, who accepted me for who I was. Later that night, I slipped away to sit on Grandma Grace's bench. The ruby ring caught the soft glow of the garden lanterns, sparkling like her eyes once did. I could almost hear her voice. True family is about love, not blood. She had been right all along. As I sat on that garden bench, surrounded by the sound of laughter from inside my house, I realized something I had been chasing for years. All my life, I thought family meant the people you were born to, the ones with your last name, the ones who raised you. But that night, as I looked around at the people who had chosen to be in my life, I finally understood what Grandma Grace had been trying to tell me all along. Family isn't about blood, it's about love. That night became a turning point. I stopped looking backward, stopped wondering what could have been. Instead, I poured my energy into building the life and connections that made me feel whole. The Grace Foundation grew quickly. With my resources and network, we built programs that didn't just hand out money, but created lasting change. We set up scholarships, therapy sessions for kids who had been through trauma, mentorship programs, and legal help for children caught in the foster system. Every week, I received letters from kids thanking us. Some sent hand-drawn pictures of their new homes or schools. Others wrote about how they finally felt seen, how someone believed in them for the first time. I kept those letters pinned to a wall in my office, a reminder that I wasn't just building companies, I was building futures. At SecureNet, things continued to soar. We expanded into Europe, Asia, and beyond. Our products became the gold standard in cybersecurity. Government agencies and major corporations trusted us to protect their most sensitive information. My executive team, Carla, James, and Victor, were more than colleagues now. They were my rock. They celebrated with me when we won contracts, comforted me when I felt overwhelmed, and reminded me to breathe when the pressure got too heavy. Carla once told me, "Rachel, you don't just run a company. You've created a culture where people actually want to come to work every day. That's rare, and it's because of you." Hearing that made me realize something. The girl who was once told she wasn't enough had built a place where people felt valued every single day. And that was worth more than all the money in the world. Despite all the success, I never forgot where I came from. I stayed humble. I remembered the ramen noodles, the late-night coding sessions, the long walks to save bus fare. Those memories kept me grounded, even as my face appeared on magazine covers and my name was listed among the most powerful women in tech. One evening, as I prepared for another board meeting, I found myself staring at that ruby ring again. It had become more than a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even when no one else believed in me, one person did. And sometimes that's all it takes. A few months after that family encounter, I received another letter in the mail. This one wasn't from a child or a foundation partner. It was from Hannah. Her words were short, stiff, but they carried a weight I didn't expect. "Rachel, thank you for setting up the education funds for Noah and Chloe. They don't fully understand yet, but one day they will. I know you don't owe us anything, but you did it anyway. For that, I'm grateful." Hannah, it wasn't an apology. Not really, but it was something. A small bridge, not for us, but for her children. And I decided that was enough. Daniel never reached out. Neither did my parents, and honestly, I didn't need them to. Their silence no longer hurt me. I had finally accepted the truth. I was never going to get the love I deserved from them, and that was okay, because I had love elsewhere. Maya became more than a mentor. She became family. She and her husband brought their kids to my house often, and the sound of children's laughter in my garden brought me a joy I can't describe. Ethan remained a trusted advisor, and he and his wife often invited me sailing on weekends. Lily and I met for coffee once a month without fail, discussing books, life, and everything in between. I had built something more valuable than anything my biological family could ever give me. A chosen family. People who showed up because they wanted to, not because they had to. 6 months after my family's visit, the Grace Foundation held its first big event at my estate. Instead of billionaires and CEOs in gowns and tuxedos, the house was filled with kids, foster parents, social workers, and volunteers. The garden that once felt like a private sanctuary became a place of laughter, running feet, and joy, that as I stood by Grandma Grace's bench, watching kids chase each other down the winding paths, I felt her presence stronger than ever. I could almost hear her saying, "See, Rachel, I told you, you have a spark, and now the world sees it too." That day I made a promise to myself. No matter how busy life got, I would never lose sight of this mission. Because helping these kids wasn't just charity, it was healing, for them and for me. Over time, the wounds left by my family began to fade. Not disappear completely, scars never truly vanish, but they no longer defined me. Instead, they became part of my story, a story of survival, resilience, and transformation. Every so often, though, the past tried to creep in. One night, after a long day, I stumbled across another one of Hannah's social media posts. It showed Noah and Chloe at a school play. The caption read, "Proud Mom Moment." For a moment, my chest tightened. I thought about all the plays and recitals I had performed in as a kid, with no one there to clap for me. I thought about how different things could have been, but then I smiled. Because Noah and Chloe would never know that kind of loneliness, at least not when it came to education. Their futures were secure because of me, and that was enough. A year after the reunion, something incredible happened. The Grace Foundation was awarded national recognition for its work. I was invited to speak at a conference in Washington, D.C., about the importance of supporting foster kids. As I stood at the podium, looking out at hundreds of people, I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who cried herself to sleep, clutching a pillow because no one else was there. And then I thought about the woman I had become. Family isn't always the people who share your blood, I told the crowd. Family is the people who stand beside you when you need them most, and every child deserves that. Every child deserves love. The applause that followed wasn't just for the speech. It felt like applause for my entire journey. When I flew back home, I walked straight into my garden, sat on Grace's bench, and whispered, "We did it, Grandma. We really did it." Life after that speech in Washington felt different. Something inside me had shifted. For years, I had carried the weight of proving myself, proving I could survive without the people who cast me aside, proving I was worthy of love, proving that their rejection didn't define me. But standing on that stage, sharing my story, I realized something important. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. I had already won. SecureNet was stronger than ever. The Grace Foundation was touching lives across the country, and for the first time, I felt steady, at peace even. But life has a way of testing us, even when we think we've reached a calm place. One Saturday afternoon, I was in the garden trimming roses when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Normally, I would ignore it, but something made me answer. "Hello," a shaky voice responded. "Rachel, it's Hannah." For a moment, I froze. It had been months since I last heard from her, and even then, it was only a short email about the kids' education funds. "What is it?" I asked carefully. There was silence on the other end for a long time before she finally said, "Mum's in the hospital. It's not good." I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. My mother, the woman who had turned her back on me, who had let me walk out of that house 15 years ago and never looked back. "What happened?" I asked flatly. "Heart failure. She's stable for now, but the doctors say it's serious. Dad's a wreck. Daniel's barely holding it together. We thought, maybe you'd want to come." The weight of her words pressed down on me. Part of me wanted to hang up, to say it wasn't my problem anymore. But another part, deep, hidden, the little girl who once just wanted her mother to love her, hesitated. "I'll think about it," I said finally. After hanging up, I sat on Grandma Grace's bench, staring at the flowers swaying in the breeze. Did I owe them anything? Did I owe her anything? Maya came by later that evening, and I told her what happened. She listened quietly, then said, "Rachel, you don't owe anyone forgiveness. But sometimes showing up is more for you than for them. It can be a way of closing a chapter." Her words lingered with me. 2 days later, I found myself walking down the sterile hallways of a hospital, the smell of antiseptic filling my nose. I paused outside the room before stepping in. There she was, my mother. Her hair was thinner, her face older, her body frail under the hospital blankets. My father sat at her bedside, holding her hand. Daniel stood in the corner, his shoulders hunched. Hannah was by the window, her kids coloring in books on the floor. When my father saw me, his eyes widened. "Rachel," my mother's eyes fluttered. Open, and for the first time in 15 years, she looked at me. Not through a screen, not in a photo, but in person. "Rachel," she whispered, her voice raspy. "You came." I stood frozen in the doorway, unsure of what to feel. Anger, hurt, sadness, they all swirled inside me. "I wasn't sure I would," I admitted softly. Her lips trembled. "I'm glad you did." The room fell into silence. Nobody knew what to say. I walked to the foot of the bed, keeping a careful distance. "How are you feeling?" She gave a weak laugh. Old, tired, regretful. Her eyes welled with tears. "I made so many mistakes, Rachel. I should have fought harder for you. I should have loved you better." The words hit me harder than I expected. For years, I had begged for some kind of acknowledgement, some shred of regret. And now, here it was, spilling out from her lips. But it didn't feel the way I thought it would. It didn't fix the past. It didn't erase the pain. It was just words. "I don't know what you want me to say," I whispered. "Say you'll forgive me," she begged, her hand trembling as she reached out. "Please, before it's too late." My chest tightened. I looked at her hand, then at her face. Part of me wanted to give her the forgiveness she asked for, but another part remembered the years of silence, the cruel words, the coldness that had defined my childhood. "I don't know if I can," I said honestly. "I've built a life without you, a family without you. I've learned to stop needing your approval. Forgiving you, it won't change the past." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "I know, but maybe it can change what's left of the future." I didn't answer right away. I simply stood there, feeling the weight of years pressing down on me. Finally, I said, "I'll think about it." I didn't stay long. The air in that hospital room was too heavy, too suffocating. As I walked out, Hannah followed me into the hallway. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. I gave her a small nod. "Take care of her, take care of the kids." And then I left. That night, I sat alone in my garden, staring up at the stars. I thought about Grandma Grace, about the way she had loved me unconditionally, about how she had known all along that love isn't about blood. I twisted the ruby ring on my finger, thinking about my mother's words: regret, forgiveness, future. I didn't know if I was ready to forgive her, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let their choices define me anymore. The next morning, I went back to work at SecureNet. I walked into the buzzing office, greeted by smiling faces, laughter, and the sound of keyboards clicking. My team, the family I chose, was there, waiting for me. And in that moment, I realized something powerful. Even if I never fully forgave my mother, even if my biological family never truly changed, I was okay. I was whole, because I had built a life filled with people who loved me for who I was. Family by choice, not by blood. The days after visiting the hospital felt heavy. I went back to my routines, but my mind kept circling back to my mother's frail voice, her hand reaching for mine, her plea for forgiveness. For years I had dreamed of hearing those words, "I should have loved you better." But when I finally did, it didn't feel healing. It just stirred up everything I thought I had buried. At SecureNet, my calendar was full. Meetings with executives, product launches, international calls. Everyone around me was excited. Our company was preparing to roll out a new AI-driven security system that would change the industry yet again. My team celebrated small wins every day, but inside, I felt distracted. One night, after a long meeting, Carla, my CTO, pulled me aside. "Rachel, you've been off lately. Not unfocused exactly, but somewhere else. Do you want to talk about it?" I hesitated, then told her the truth about my mother being in the hospital. Carla listened quietly, then said something that stayed with me. "Forgiveness isn't about them. It's about you. You don't forgive to free them, you forgive to free yourself." Her words echoed in my head for days. A week later, Hannah called again. "Mom's condition is getting worse," she said softly. "Doctors say we don't know how much time she has. If you want to see her, now's the time." I sat in silence, my mind a battlefield. Part of me wanted to slam the door shut on the past, to refuse to let them back into my life. But another part, the part that had always longed for closure. I had to go, so I went this time. When I walked into the hospital room, the air was different, softer, quieter. My mother looked smaller than before, her body fragile, her breathing shallow. My father was asleep in the chair beside her, his head bowed. Daniel sat by the window, scrolling through his phone, his face blank. Hannah was humming softly to her kids, who were curled up on a blanket. When Mum saw me, her lips curved into a faint smile. "Rachel," she whispered. I sat down carefully in the chair beside her bed. For a long moment, I just looked at her, the woman who had been both my mother and my greatest source of pain. "You came back," she said weakly. "I did," I replied softly. Her hand trembled as she reached out again. This time, I let her take mine. Her skin was cold, paper-thin, but her grip was surprisingly strong. "Rachel," she whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know that, but I want you to know I loved you. I just didn't know how to show it. I let fear and pride get in the way, and I regret it every day." The words pierced my heart. They didn't erase the years of hurt, but they were honest. And maybe, in her final days, that honesty was the most she could give me. I took a shaky breath. "I don't know if I can forgive everything, Mum, but I can forgive enough to let go. I don't want to carry this anger anymore. It's too heavy." Her eyes filled with relief. She squeezed my hand weakly. "Thank you," she whispered. "That's all I needed." For the first time in years, I felt something soften inside me. Not a complete healing wounds that deep don't disappear overnight, but a release. A loosening of the chains I had carried for too long. We sat together in silence, our hands still joined. I realized then that this was the closest thing to peace we were ever going to have, and I was okay with that. 2 weeks later, she passed away. The funeral was small, held at the same church where I had once sat through countless sermons as a child. My father, Daniel, and Hannah were there, along with a handful of relatives I hadn't seen in decades. They all looked at me with curiosity, some with guilt, others with judgment. I didn't cry during the service. I had already cried enough over the years. Instead, I felt a strange calm. I had said what needed to be said. I had given her, and myself, closure. After the burial, Hannah approached me. "Thank you for coming, for everything you said to Mum. It meant a lot to her." Nodded. "I'm glad I did." Daniel, on the other hand, avoided me. He barely made eye contact, and my father, he said nothing. Just a stiff nod before walking away. I realized then that I wasn't going to get apologies from them, and that was fine. I didn't need them anymore. After the funeral, I went home and sat in my garden by Grandma Grace's bench. I slipped the ruby ring off my finger and held it up to the sunlight, watching it sparkle. "Closure," I whispered to myself. Finally, from that day forward, something in me shifted. I stopped looking back so much. Instead, I looked forward to the life I was still building, the people who truly mattered. At SecureNet, I poured myself into leading with compassion. I made sure every employee felt valued the way I had once longed to feel. At the Grace Foundation, I expanded our programs to include transitional housing for teens aging out of foster care, so they wouldn't end up on the streets. The more I gave, the more whole I felt. Months later, we held another event at my estate, this one a summer festival. For foster kids and their families, we had bounce houses, games, food trucks, and music. The air was filled with laughter and joy. At one point, a little girl with curly hair ran up to me, holding a balloon. "Are you Miss Rachel?" she asked. I smiled. "That's me." She hugged my legs tightly. "Thank you for helping me. I have a new home now, and my new mom and dad say I can be anything I want to be when I grow up." Tears filled my eyes as I bent down to hug her back. "That's right," I whispered. "You can be anything." In that moment, I realized something powerful. Every act of love I gave to these children was rewriting my own story. I couldn't change my past, but I could shape the future for them, and for me. That night, as the festival lights twinkled in the garden, I stood on the balcony of my estate and looked out at the people below, kids playing, parents chatting, volunteers smiling, and for the first time in my life, I felt something I had chased for decades. I felt at home. The summer festival at my estate stayed in my mind for weeks afterward. Every smile I saw, every child laughing, every parent who pulled me aside to thank MIT, all filled the hollow space that had lived inside me for so long. For years, I had been driven by anger, by the need to prove myself to the people who cast me aside. But standing there, surrounded by kids who finally had a chance at a better life, I realized something had changed. I wasn't living for revenge anymore. I was living for purpose. But with purpose came responsibility. So had grown into a global company. We had thousands of employees, contracts across the world, and competitors trying to copy our every move. At the same time, the Grace Foundation was becoming one of the most trusted non-profits in the country. I had board meetings, keynote speeches, fundraising events, and endless decisions to make. Some nights, I stayed awake until dawn, staring at my ceiling, wondering if I could balance it all. Could I keep leading SecureNet at the top, while also guiding the foundation? Could I keep being present for my chosen family, my friends, my employees, and still find time for myself? One evening, as I sat in my office, surrounded by stacks of papers and glowing screens, Carla walked in. She closed the door behind her and said, "Rachel, you need to slow down. You're burning out." I rubbed my temples. I can't slow down. If I don't keep pushing, everything I built could fall apart. She sat across from me, her expression firm but kind. "Rachel, SecureNet doesn't just rely on you anymore. You've built a team that can handle things. Same with the foundation. You don't have to carry everything alone. That's what leaders do. They build trust, not control. Her words hit me hard. For years, I had carried the belief that if I didn't handle everything myself, it would all collapse. But maybe Carla was right. Maybe part of leadership was letting go that weekend. I invited my closest circle, Maya, Ethan, Lily, and my executive team to the estate for a private dinner. As we sat in the candlelit garden, I told them what had been weighing on me. I've been holding on too tight, I admitted, trying to control everything because I'm afraid of losing it. But maybe it's time to share the weight. Ethan raised his glass. That's not weakness, Rachel. That's wisdom. No empire is built by one person alone. You've already proven your strength. Now it's about legacy. Legacy. That word stuck with me. Over the next few months, I started delegating more. I gave Carla more authority over product development, trusted James with bigger financial decisions, and let Victor handle international operations. At the foundation, I hired an experienced director to oversee the day-to-day work. While I focused on the bigger vision, the more I let go, the more I realized I didn't have to lose control to gain freedom. My people were capable. They cared. And trusting them didn't weaken my role, it strengthened everything we were building. But just as I was finding balance, life threw me a curveball. One crisp autumn morning, I received a letter in the mail. Not an email, not a business proposal, a handwritten letter, the kind people rarely send anymore. The envelope was plain, the handwriting shaky. I opened it and froze. It was from my father, Rachel. Your mother is gone, and I know I don't have the right to ask you for anything. But I'm an old man now, and the truth is, I don't have much time left. I want to see you before it's too late. Not for money, not for help, just to see you. To tell you some things I should have told you long ago. Dad, I read the letter 3 times, my hands trembling. My father, the man who had stood silent while my mother cast me out, the man who had emailed me to stop contacting them, the man who never once reached out in 15 years, wanted to see me now. Part of me wanted to tear the letter into pieces. Another part wanted to ignore it completely. But another part, deeper and quieter, wondered what he could possibly have to say. I called Maya that evening and read her the letter. She was silent for a moment, then asked, "What does your gut say?" "My gut says he's too late," I admitted, "but my heart wants answers." "Then maybe you should go," she said softly. "Not for him, for you, to close that final chapter." So I went. My father was living in a small apartment on the outskirts of town, nothing like the big family home I grew up in. The building was old, the paint peeling, the hallways dimly lit. When I knocked on his door, it took him a full minute to answer. When he did, I barely recognized him. His one strong frame was frail, his hair completely white, his eyes tired. He leaned heavily on a cane, his hands trembling. "Rachel," he said, his voice cracking. "You came." I stood there for a long moment, taking him in. Finally, I nodded. I did. He stepped aside, and I walked in. The apartment was bare, sparsely furnished, with a few family photos on the shelves. One of them caught my eye, a picture of me as a child, maybe 7 years old, smiling shyly at the camera. Picked it up slowly. "You kept this." "I kept all of them," he whispered. "Even when we pretended you didn't exist, I couldn't throw them away. They reminded me of what I lost." We sat down at the small kitchen table. He poured us both tea, his hands shaking so badly that he spilled some on the table. "I don't know where to start," he said finally, his eyes downcast. "I've failed you, Rachel. As a father, I let my pride, my fear, and my stubbornness get in the way of being the parent you needed. I thought I was teaching you toughness, preparing you for the world, but all I did was push you away." His words cut deep. They weren't excuses, not really, just confessions. I don't need your money, he continued quickly. I don't need anything from you. I just want you to know I did love you. I just didn't know how to show it. And when you walked out that door 15 years ago, I wanted to run after you. But I didn't, and I've regretted it every single day since. I sat in silence, my throat tight. You don't have to forgive me, he said, his voice breaking. I just didn't want to leave this world without telling you the truth. I looked at him, the man who had been both my protector and my betrayer, my father and my stranger. Finally, I said, I don't know if I can forgive everything, but I can accept your honesty, and I can let go of the hate. That's all I have to give. Tears streamed down his face as he nodded. That's more than I deserve. We sat there for hours, talking quietly. He told me stories about his own childhood, about mistakes he had made long before me. He admitted his failures, not just as a father, but as a man. And though it didn't erase the past, it gave me something. I had never expected understanding. When I left his apartment that night, I felt lighter. Not because everything was fixed, it wasn't, but because the last piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. For the first time in my life, I had faced every member of my family, heard their truths, and spoken mine. And now I was free. After visiting my father, I drove home in silence. The city lights blurred past my window, but my mind was somewhere else. For years, I had carried this heavy knot in my chest anger, grief, abandonment. Facing my father didn't untangle it completely, but it loosened it enough for me to breathe freely for the first time. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the night sky was clear. Stars glittered above my mansion, and the garden lights cast a warm glow over the paths. I walked straight to Grandma Grace's bench, sat down, and let the cool night air wash over me. I touched the ruby ring on my finger, whispering, "It's over, Grandma." Finally, and for the first time, I truly meant it. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter. Not because everything was perfect far from it, but because I had finally accepted that I didn't need closure from anyone else. I had created my own. Over the following months, I noticed a change in myself. Meetings at SecureNet felt less stressful. I laughed more with my team, took time to actually enjoy victories instead of rushing to the next challenge. At the Grace Foundation, I didn't just sign checks or give speeches. I spent time with the kids, listening to their stories, playing games, letting them know someone truly cared. One afternoon, I was at a foundation center when a teenage boy named Marcus approached me. He had aged out of foster care, and we had placed him in our transitional housing program. "Miss Rachel?" he asked nervously. Double quotes, "Yes, Marcus." He looked down at his shoes, then back up. I just wanted to say, "You saved my life. I didn't think I was going to make it, but you gave me a chance. And now I'm starting community college next semester." Tears stung my eyes as I hugged him. "No, Marcus, you saved yourself. I just gave you the tools. You did the rest." Moments like that reminded me why I kept going. Money and success were nice, but this was what filled the empty spaces inside me. One night, I hosted another gathering at my estate. This time, it wasn't just colleagues or friends, it was everyone. My executive team, my foundation, staff, volunteers, kids, foster parents, Maya's family, Ethan and his wife Lily, Nina. My house and garden buzzed with energy, laughter spilling into every corner. At one point, I stood on the balcony, looking down at all of them, and it hit me. This was my family. Not the one I was born into, but the one I had built. A family made of love, trust, and choice. Later that evening, Maya joined me on the balcony. "You've come a long way, Rachel," she said with a smile. "Sometimes I still can't believe it," I admitted. That girl who once cried alone in her room on her birthday. She never could have imagined this. Maya put a hand on my shoulder. "And yet, you made it real. That's the power of resilience. You turned pain into something beautiful. Her words stayed with me long after the party ended. Over the next year, SecureNet reached new heights, but I began to think less about growth and more about legacy. What did I want to leave behind? Not just money or technology, but meaning. I started writing a memoir not for fame, but for the kids in our programs. I wanted them to know that no matter how broken their beginnings were, they could build something extraordinary. I wrote about the lonely birthdays, the harsh words, the nights of doubt, but I also wrote about resilience, courage, and the power of finding your own family. As I wrote, I realized I wasn't just telling my story, I was healing through it. Every page was another piece of the weight I was letting go. Meanwhile, my father's health declined. He passed quietly one winter evening, alone in his small apartment. When I got the call, I felt strangely calm. We had already said what needed to be said. There was nothing left hanging between us. I attended his funeral not for him, but for me, to close the final chapter. Standing by his grave, I whispered, "I hope you found peace." I have. Walking away, I didn't look back. Months later, the Grace Foundation launched its biggest project yet, a nationwide mentorship program for kids in foster care. We paired them with adults who understood their struggles, people who could guide them, believe in them, stand by them. Watching the program unfold, I knew this would be my true legacy. Not the billion-dollar company, not the mansion, not the magazine covers, but the lives touched, the futures changed. On the 15th anniversary of SecureNet's founding, my board threw a massive celebration. The media called it a tech empire's golden moment. But when I stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd, I didn't talk about money or technology. Instead, I said, success isn't measured by what you own, but by who you lift along the way. I built SecureNet out of pain, but I built the Grace Foundation out of love. And if there's one lesson my life has taught me, it's this. Family isn't blood. Family is love. And love is what truly lasts. The applause was thunderous, but what mattered most was the look on the faces of the kids in the audience, their eyes shining with hope. That night, I returned home, walked into my garden, and sat on Grandma Grace's bench once more. The flowers she loved swayed gently in the evening breeze. The ruby ring sparkled faintly in the moonlight. "I did it, Grandma," I whispered. "I turned the pain into something good, and I'm not alone anymore." For the first time, I didn't feel the hollow ache of being left out. I didn't feel the sting of abandonment. I didn't feel the need to prove anything. I felt whole, and that, more than all the money, more than all the success, was the real victory.